Hey everyone, welcome to my talk. It's called Building Shortcat Faster. For those who don't, oops, that's not the right button. For those who don't know me, I'm Chendo, aka Jack Chen, but Chendo is what people know me by. I like to build things, specifically workflow efficiency tooling. My day job, I'm a co-founder at Assembly4, and my socials are Chendo on Twitter and Slack and anywhere that's relevant. So today, I'm talking to you about my app called Shortcat, which is a Mac keyboard productivity app, where the goal is you can do things faster using less brain power. And what that effectively means is it enables you to click on UI elements with your keyboard. And the way it does that, thank you Tony for explaining the accessibility API, because this is very relevant to my talk, is it uses the accessibility API to enumerate the user interface and make it available so you can search it with a fuzzy search algorithm. So in VS Code, Sublime, Xcode now has it, which I also kind of helped get there. You can also activate menu items, switch windows, insert emojis for the time being. And it works, it works almost everywhere on your Mac where accessibility works. I actually first presented this at Melbourne CocoaHeads back in 2012, which is a very long time ago. We were back in RMIT. And I remember, eating pizza in the hallway a lot.
I think we still have that recording somewhere.
Oh, we do? I'd like to see it. I'll give a quick demo because it's probably easier to show than actually. Oh, this is going to be interesting. I didn't think about this. Let's system preferences. Cool. Okay, so let's say when you activate Shortcat, it scans the interface and then makes everything visible and searchable. For example, if I want to go back, B will search, you'll see back, and because the element itself is tagged and labeled correctly in this particular case, so you can hit enter and it clicks on it for you. So this works pretty much everywhere, including in Electron apps, in Safari, in web views, so on and so forth. So for example, just a quick demo, if I want to go into change my network DNS settings, I type network, I can go, I guess I don't really have, let's try advanced, so ADV, search as advanced, I can hit enter, DNS, add, so the add button is actually labeled correctly as well, add DNS server. Sometimes Apple doesn't label their stuff correctly, which is extremely annoying. But yeah, so I can effectively operate most of my Mac with just my keyboard. It also searches menus, so I'm not sure how that's going to search the menu there, but let's just see. Menu item. Oh yeah, so you can see it's probably a bit small actually, but you can see that it can also enumerate the menu and show you the keyboard shortcuts as well as all the relevant stuff there. So I think in displays, so it exposes every single preference pane as a menu as well, so I can hit enter and it effectively activates that. It can also do emoji stuff, which is probably less exciting to people, but let's say you activate Shortcat, you hit colon to enter emoji search mode, and then you can insert emojis with a synonym supported emoji database. So for example, on Slack, I think the official hanky is for the poop emoji, but I've made it so that it also works with turd, crap, poo, and number 2. Oh, there it is. Because it was like Apple's own emoji picker was frustrating me a lot, so I kind of hacked that in a weekend, and now I have to maintain it, which is the downside of it. But yeah, that's the demo of Shortcat. Oh, where's my screen? Why did I do this? I've always been passionate about improving workflow efficiency, mostly because I use computers for both work and play. And so since I was a teenager, I had been worried about RSI. So during uni, I made the painful switch to a different keyboard layout called Dvorak. That is you don't see it. That's a picture of it there. As you can see, only the A and M keys are in the same location. Everything else is different. And it was quite painful to learn, so I don't suggest learning this. Learn Colmac or something else. But Dvorak is good because it was designed with the English letter frequencies in mind, right? So as you can see, all the vowels are on your left hand, and then all the commonly used letters are effectively on your home row. QWERTY is designed to prevent typewriters from jamming. So ask yourself why you're using an ancient keyboard layout that is designed to make you slower, ultimately. And on the same note, I kind of got mad at needing to move my hands off the keyboard to click, and that's why I'm here today, I suppose. So back in 2012, I had to pick a way to build this. So my technical background back then, and I guess also now, is primarily web-based. So that's kind of Ruby, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, as well as infrastructure and ops. At best, I would be, back then, I would have been a Objective-C hobbyist, where my only major, I guess, Objective-C bit of code would be I added a feature to item 2 that some of you might know as semantic history, where the idea is you can command and click on a path in the back on your buffer to open in your text editor. Where the goal is to effectively make the backtrace, you can go from the backtrace to the relevant line in your editor quite quickly. I'll give a quick demo because if you don't know it, it's very good. Obviously, I'm biased because I wrote it, but let me make that bigger. Is it my night shift? Do I have night shift on?
Could be.
Hold on. Where's my cursor? Okay. How do I turn night shift off? Right. Shift options. Let's try. Night shift. Turn off. Hey, I turned it off, I think. Better? Kind of?
I'll keep working on that.
Okay, cool. We'll do some weird flickering thing. So, if you hold on Command and hover over a path, you'll see that iTerm highlights it, right? So the idea is you click here, and it opens up in my editor on my other screen. Okay, cool. Where's my cursor? Yeah, okay, so believe me when I say when you command click on it, it opens up the editor to the correct line. So you don't have to like, mess around, open your editor, get there, and it understands characters as well. Let me see if I can just, oh my god. Okay. Oh, no. Alright, so let's go back to here. Let's open something completely random. So here, line 34, character 51. There you go, line 34, character 51. So this works with, most common editors. If you use iTerm, very useful. I suggest you use it. If you like saving a bit of time. Back to talk. Yeah. So okay. With that in mind, to pick the first architecture for Shortcat, I realized after building that iTerm feature, I didn't like Objective-C. It's kind of verbose and too many square brackets for me. I like Ruby, so it's easy to read and write, at least for me. That screenshot there is a bit of the prototype code for Shortcat that I first hacked together. And I found there was a project called MacRuby, which is a official Apple project, which was based on Ruby Cocoa, where the idea is you can use Ruby to write Mac apps. Yeah. The good part about this was I was able to have a working prototype in an evening, except the evening was actually probably until 3 a.m. in the morning. But it was enough to be able to show people at work the next day, which is the same day, I suppose, which was great. I was productive immediately, which is fantastic when you want to test an idea, and you're still able to build to a native app that runs and feels like a Mac app. However, performance was a big issue, as there was a large overhead on calling into Cocoa and Carbon APIs, which is painful when you have to make a lot of accessibility API calls. It was also still interpreted. Obviously, interpreted will always be slower than compiled native. Getting data out of Carbon would be tricky at times, and ultimately building the interface felt really jank. But the main issue was longevity concerns, and I was right, as MacRuby died in 2011. No. Yeah, 2011? That was before Shortcat. Anyway. Yeah, okay. Because the main dev had left Apple and started RubyMotion as an external project, which is the same idea, but rather than using interpreted Ruby, it would use LLVM to compile Ruby into native, which was much faster. But ultimately, that got sold, and it's pretty much dead today. So I'm kind of glad I didn't go down that road. So for the next bit of the architecture, which I'll call V1, I suppose, I had to go with a trusted and, I guess, usable Objective-C, as Swift did not exist back in 2012, which is quite sad. I also used reactive Cocoa, as functional reactive programming was all the rage back then. Also used Sparkle, which is a update kind of framework, which most apps use, I believe. And back then, I used HockeyApp for error reporting, which has since been bought by Microsoft, so it's really bad now. One benefit of this particular architecture was I was able to leverage more, I guess, Cocoa APIs. So one cool feature I was able to add was matching non-English languages with English letters. So a demo of that here in Japanese. So it would be able to take effectively non-English languages and turn them into a English representation. So for example, that button, the first 3 characters say subete. So SUBE will actually match it, which was very cool at the point in time. But I haven't re-implemented that feature because I don't think anyone actually used it. So the good parts about this, Objective-C has a extensive ecosystem, which is great, loads of libraries, all that stuff. Instruments.app is fantastic. I would say probably the best profiler type software that I've ever used, and it's plenty fast enough. The bad, building UIs sucked still. I don't like storyboards. Constraints were kind of annoying. I don't like the kind of weird graphical way you kind of build it, but also it was just kind of hostile to work with. And merging a storyboard in Git was a disaster generally. And I still didn't like writing Objective-C. I just had to do it. And Reactive Cocoa made debugging horrendous with intense stack traces. So that screenshot there is, I think, from GitHub Desktop, which used that. And you would just have like 200 frames, and like 80% of that would be Reactive Cocoa. So it was really hard to figure out what was going on. And also all the method calls probably would have been slow for performance. And also the accessibility API was not commonly used back then, and it was hard to kind of find examples on how to use it. So I kind of ran out of steam. I had slow progress because building the UI I wanted to build for Shortcat was pretty much very annoying to build. There was frustration at broken accessibility implementations in apps, especially within Apple's own apps. And it was also an architectural dead end because kind of my first major Mac app, I made a lot of mistakes. And it didn't help that the Mac dev communities were generally a lot smaller than iOS, which is just a factor of how it is. But ultimately, I ran out of mental capacity and burnt out from working at various startups at the point in time. And that little screenshot photo is the changelog where I pretty much did nothing for like 5-6 years. And then in came Swift and Swift UI. So the last meaningful update I released was back in late 2014. I began experimenting with Swift for Shortcat in 2017. And honestly, I love Swift, minus all the weird compiler issues you would have and weird type shenanigans that would happen. Thankfully, a lot less so now. But I still didn't like storyboards. They were really holding me back from doing what I wanted to do. So when Swift UI came around, I gave it a play during the second lockdown of 2020 because I had oodles of time, which I liked. But The tooling was a bit clunky still. Previews, at least back then, took too long to update for what I wanted, and I would get broken previews a lot. So that screenshot there kind of shows the preview broke for some weird linker issue that took me a long time to figure out because no one else had run into it. Turns out changing the product or target name causes Xcode to shit the bed a lot, and I couldn't find anything until I magically figured it out what it was by myself. And previews is not hot reloading, which is what I really wanted. And what that means is it doesn't work on a running app. It also had a new ecosystem, so or at least back then, so there wasn't a lot of I guess libraries and tooling and widgets you can use. So you had to build a lot of stuff yourself, and I'm quite lazy, so yeah. What I wanted was the ability to have fast iterations, and what that means to me is state-preserving hot reloading. A good ecosystem, so decent libraries and all that stuff, great tooling, and for me that kind of meant good debugging tools and good error reporting tools. This is the image I feel like closest represents what I wanted, which is, I mean, the analogy isn't perfect, but changing tires on a car while it's moving seems like a useful thing. The viable choices back then, I first looked at React Native for Mac, which sounds good, apart from people don't liking JavaScript kind of stuff. But ultimately, I had a look and decided it was bad because it's a Microsoft project. Can anyone really trust Microsoft to maintain a React Native for Mac? I mean, I couldn't, so I kind of just tossed that idea straight out. So ultimately, I was left with standard HTML JavaScript frameworks like React, Vue, Svelte, all of which have state-preserving hot reloading. There's prior art for using HTML.js in Mac apps definitely exists. The two main categories are either Electron, which is used in Discord, Slack, 1password8, Signal, and many others, Notion, and then not Electron, which I think there's iTunes Store used some of that, and some preference panes, and that's all I could find at short notice. Admittedly, I didn't look very hard. Electron, there's a lot of hate for Electron. I feel like a lot of it's fair hate as well. It's definitely not suited for panel type apps, which is what Shortcat ultimately is. I'm pretty sure there's no ability to query accessibility APIs, and considering it's cross-platforms, it wouldn't make sense for it to do it. I had no desire to be cross-platform. And Electron framework is just a smidge under 200 megabytes, which is a lot to add to an app. So I turned to looking at WKWebView, which is effectively Apple's own framework for displaying web content inside both Mac and iOS apps, which if you've built a web view in your app, you probably would have used it. So given it's Apple's own, it benefits from Apple's full stack integration. So it's battle tested on mobile class devices, which means it's probably pretty good on both CPU efficiency and memory efficiency. And as it's built in, it adds 0 megabytes to app size, assuming you don't count linking overhead. And in early experiments, I confirmed that WKWebViews can be transparent, which was really important to me. So the next iteration at the architecture then became a Swift core, which hosts the accessibility engine, which is the code that handles talking to the accessibility APIs and giving me somewhat useful data back. It also handles the UI actions, so mouse movement, mouse clicks, inserting emojis, which is actually a lot harder when you have to consider Electron apps don't respect how the text APIs that native NS text fields use. And Sparkle again, because again, I don't think there's anything else out there that does anything like Sparkle that is as battle tested. The interface uses WKWebView, and inside I decided to opt for Vue and Vuex, which for the interface, where I picked it for a combination of ergonomics, speed, and ecosystem. Where ergonomics is, I guess, the developer experience of like, it was just easy to build and iterate on. Yeah. I also use self-hosted Sentry for both error and performance tracking for both Swift and JavaScript code. And that screenshot there is the source code for the main query panel that you would have saw underneath the window just before. And as you can see, it's just HTML. The good. So I had massive improvements in productivity. A lot of that which came from proper hot reloading, which I'll give a demo after the slide. I was able to iterate quite quickly with the interface as well as the logic, because it turns out when I use a language I've been using for 20-something years, it's a lot faster than using a language I've not really used. JavaScript has a massive ecosystem. Just look at any node modules folder. Someone got the joke. Safari Web Inspector is quite good. You could almost think of it like Reveal, but built into Safari. Obviously not as good as Reveal, but the capability is there. So that screenshot there you see is Safari Web Inspector, and I can use that to inspect a running version of my app. And I can do the same thing, like tweak the style, CSS, pretty much, I guess, what Reveal can do, but it's just in my browser, I suppose. I also get access to rich logging, which is actually pretty cool. What that means is rather than simple like text-based logging, I can log entire tables, I can log UI elements, as in I can log accessibility elements in the console, which I can then view in context of a tree, which is amazing. Fantastic for debugging. Shortcat is 15 megabytes, which half of which is Paddle and Sparkle. The icon accounts for 3 megabytes because it's quite detailed. And the actual binary with the native and packed JavaScript code is 5 megabytes. I almost forgot to do a demo. How am I going to do this? Hot reloading. Let's do... let's do that there. Let's activate Shortcat. Debug menu, lock. Cool. Alright, so we'll stay open. Oh my god, this is going to be... Alright. I did not practice this part where I would have to look back on a screen. Okay. So, what you see, this is the code for the results row. So each row in the result view. This is just, so this is what that looks like. A Vue component has everything in one file, which some people hate, but I love it. So you have markup at the top, you have CSS in the middle, and then you have like JavaScript at the bottom. So that kind of lets me edit everything to do with the component in one place, which I love. So I'll just, let's say I hated my users, and I want them to use Comic Sans for the font. Font family, oh my god, Comic Sans MS. And I hit save, and it's Comic Sans MS. So I probably can't see that very well. So, huh? You can't. Oh well, I mean that's why I did it. Font size, I'll just double it for the time being to make it easy to see. Yeah, cool. Obviously, yeah. So I hit save and it's there, and I can do this with a running app, which is quite nice. And it's not just styles as well. I can actually modify code. For example, if I want to make it say something else entirely, that lag is really annoying to deal with. Hello, CocoaHeads. Hit save, and it's there. So this makes iterating and building out a feature very, very fast compared to what's possible, what's currently possible in any of Apple stuff. Oh my god, what's my cursor? And yeah, that's the power of hot reloading. It's not all gravy though. So obviously the big problem is increased integration complexity. So this is probably most relevant in building the actual app. I don't think anyone's done it the way I've done it at the very least. So it's definitely new ground. And there's also the problem of error reporting and simplification for two-code bases. And I mean, the actual part of talking from the website to the native side is actually not too bad. You just kind of use post message to pass messages from each one, which has been fine. But it's also off the beaten track. I don't think anyone else is doing it like this, which makes it more isolating, I suppose. But the big problem with all this is I don't like JavaScript. You can ask me why later. Performance and efficiency. I'm assuming a lot of people have memory usage as a key one here. So after running Shortcat for a week, this is a very unscientific test. The native part was using 85 megs. The web content itself, which hosts the actual web view, 180 megs. There's a networking process, which I assume Apple has a good reason to do it that way, but that's 20 megs, for a total of just a smidge under 300 megs. Comparisons to existing apps, Calendar app and the Calendar agent uses 330 megs. Signal, which is Electron, I'm pretty sure, is 1.1 gig. Tweetbot is native, but 432 megs still. CPU efficiency, the fuzzy searching part with all the synonyms I'm working with, and it kind of does a lot to make things more searchable than not, so you can be kind of a bit off and figure it out. It takes about 10 milliseconds on my M1X MacBook Pro, which is probably unfair comparison to a lot of machines out there. I have not been able to test on older Intel Macs because I don't have one that can run Monterey anymore. So if someone has a slow Intel Mac that can run Monterey they want to sell, hit me up. It uses no CPU when idle, which I feel like is a given, but you know, I'll say it there. The web content uses less CPU than the native end, but that's kind of because the enumeration part is a lot more CPU intensive than the user interface part. The time efficiency. So this is, I guess, is it efficient to build it this way? And for me, at least, it feels at least 2 to 3 times faster for me to build it with this architecture compared to my previous one. It could be high, it could be small. I don't know. This is just a wild guess. And this is important to me because Shortcat is one of many side projects and hobbies, and so that's why time efficiency is important to me. What I would like to see, honestly, I want to see Apple implement their own hot reloading mechanism. Pretty sure Android has had it for quite some time now. I don't do any Android development, so I don't know, but I'm pretty sure they do. Web has had it for quite some time, obviously. And I think it's probably about time Apple made it happen. I know there's like third-party projects which kind of do it, but I feel like something like this is better off Apple themselves doing it, so hopefully that happens one day. I want to see more flexible licensing SDKs. That isn't Apple because they charge 15 to 30%. Mostly I want to see the ability to have like fixed one-off purchase for year updates alongside monthly annual subscriptions, so I can eventually make money off both the people who hate subscriptions and the people who love them. I would also like to see apps using the correct I guess AX role definition. This is kind of like the traits thing that you would have saw in Tony's talk. Again, lots of apps don't implement accessibility correctly, and most people won't realize until they use a tool like Shortcat, which heavily utilizes the API, and then see that even in Xcode there's buttons which aren't tagged as buttons. So I've had to resort to effectively considering static text as valid UI controls because in many apps they are. So if you want to make sure your app is accessible, you can use Shortcat to kind of just operate. If you can operate Shortcat, if you can operate your app with Shortcat, then it has a good chance of being accessible, but it's not going to be as good as a tool like Reveal, who will actually show you all the hierarchy, the order, and so on and so forth. Cool thing to note though, Shortcat does work on iOS apps. If you run an iOS app on your Mac or in a simulator, Shortcat will work on that. So it's kind of a good way to kind of do a quick litmus test of whether or not you can actually, whether basic stuff is tagged correctly, ultimately. Oh yeah, Shortcat also works in the browser. I think I said that already. And yeah, works on Slack and Electron apps, which has been annoying to work with. And ultimately, I want to see more apps exposing the interface in a more structured intent form. We're seeing more of that with more apps implementing their own command palette type interfaces. I think that's honestly the future, and until then, Shortcat could probably get most of the way there. That's all I had to talk about today. If you like the idea of Shortcat and try it out, you can brew install Shortcat or download it from shortcat.app. You can follow Shortcat app on Twitter for more. My socials, Twitter, Chendo, and on Slack, I'm Chendo as well. And I have a blog which I haven't updated for quite some time, but that's also chen.do. Any questions? Hello?
Yo, did post them in Slack, but 2 questions. How much effort does creating the UI that resembles a native app take when using HTML and JavaScript?
Oh, it's like super easy. I've been building web stuff for 20 years or so, I suppose. So it's probably not a good indicator. But if I had to build, like for example, that view of Shortcat where you saw the query panel and all that stuff, that would have taken. I never got to that point with SwiftUI because I kind of just gave up because it didn't work the way I wanted to do. And then I was like, okay, I need to make it an overlay. And I was like, okay, I need to use an NS hosting view and then do all sorts of weird stuff. And I just never really got there in the end. So I don't know. But if it helps, so when Shortcat is activated, so when Shortcat is activated, that is actually, it actually creates a transparent window and a transparent web view, and Shortcat is, and the overlay is kind of taking over the entire screen. We can't see that because it's transparent, but when it overlays and shows you the overlay with all the highlighted elements and stuff, all that is kind of being drawn as HTML elements and then being overlaid onto the screen. And then I can, like, for example, in this state, I can then go in and tweak how everything looks, which is the whole reason why I built it that way. Sorry, that's not really an answer to your question.
No, it gives a good indication as to why you made that choice. So yeah.
Effectively, I was able to, because the main thing I couldn't do with the old Shortcat was, it was like the only UI was like a text box, and then all the highlighted elements, and all that stuff was kind of slow. Whereas now I was able to get to the query panel in probably like 2 evenings worth of work, and that was beginning to be functional, and that was probably at least an order of magnitude faster than I could have done it in SwiftUI, I think.
Cool. Second question. A lot of people don't run with the standard font size on their Macs. Does Shortcat take those different settings into account? Any challenges in implementing it?
I haven't tested that, but one thing that does work is, dark versus light mode. Safari has the ability to effectively detect what the system wants, and I just present the appropriate. I just apply the relevant CSS for that, and it was really easy. But I'm not sure about the font sizes. If Safari can expose it to me, then I can use it. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Should talk to the guys from Art Processors about font sizes.
Yeah.
And web content. Were there any other questions?
Cool. Thank you.
Cool.